Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I am discussing the potential for severe thunderstorms for the rest of tonight across the lower Mississippi Valley and for Friday, January 12th, across the southeastern states. So it's been a heavily advertised event and hearing a lot of chatter about the potential risks, so I wanted to do a video talking about the setup and kind of give my thoughts on how this will play out. And I'll go into the system I'm tracking for next week and the potential for a winter weather setup. So if you enjoy this video, leave a like and subscribe, and we're going to get started. So it's been quite an active weather pattern that we've been in for the past week, and that's going to continue into next week here. So we're going to focus on today on the severe weather threat for the rest of tonight and for tomorrow. I'm going to discuss that first, and then at the end of the video, we'll talk about next week. So I'll go over the severe weather outlooks for the rest of tonight, and we'll also look at tomorrow as well. So this is the severe weather outlook that is valid for Thursday, and that is valid through about 6 a.m. Friday morning. So we have an enhanced risk of severe weather that is outlined by the Storm Prediction Center for places like Shreveport, Louisiana, and I believe it stops just south of Little Rock, Arkansas. So it's kind of over the Architects region, and with a slight and marginal risk surrounding that. So we have an all hazards threat possible for the rest of tonight, including a tornado threat for the Architects, and mostly west of the Mississippi River. That 10% hatched region here is where the potential for a strong tornado is there, with any storms that can develop, and kind of more discrete storms that can develop across northeast Texas, far northwest Louisiana, and southern Arkansas. And the 5% and 2% tornado risks around that. And so we also have a threat for damaging winds. And that hatched zone is where you could see a significant damaging wind threat materialize, where gusts could exceed 75 miles per hour. And also have the threat for large hail. Mostly early on in the severe weather event, but also can't rule out a large hail threat with storms tonight. And then we're going to go into tomorrow, and that is been a very heavily advertised threat of severe weather, where the models earlier in the week were pretty insane with the potential setup for Friday, but have since then backed off a little bit as we get closer to the event. So we'll talk about what some of those limiting factors are going to be as we go through the video. But for Friday, we have an enhanced risk level 3 out of 5 that is outlined for northern Mississippi and northwest Alabama, mostly for a damaging wind threat that is in our 30% hatched area. So that is where we could see significant damaging wind gusts with storms as they track through northern Mississippi and northern Alabama Friday morning into Friday afternoon. And large hail is going to be pretty much a very low threat for large hail. This is mostly going to be a damaging wind threat, and could see a few tornadoes here with a pretty broad 5% that is drawn from northern Mississippi down from Mississippi and Alabama and over to the Georgia and the southeast U.S. coast. So that provides a good summary of the risk areas that we're watching. Now let's get an idea of the current state of the atmosphere. So this is the water vapor imagery from Thursday evening, and we have a really potent shortwave trough that is ejecting into the southern plains. That is contoured here, you see on your screen. This is the main driver for the severe weather threat that is ongoing across the state of Arkansas, and the severe weather that is expected on Friday. So we can see the line of severe storms that is ongoing here across Arkansas. I can zoom in to get a more regional look. So these storms here are ongoing across Arkansas. Those are severe that are producing damaging straight line winds. Those are moving off to the northeast here across northern Arkansas and into Missouri. And we're watching down here across Louisiana here for any potential supercells that could develop, and those could have an all hazards threat, large hail, damaging winds, and potential for a tornado. Let's go into some of the observed data and we're going to start with our upper air charts. And we're starting at 300 millibars, and we are looking for the jet streams. And we have a very potent branch of the jet stream that is dipping down across much of the continental United States and stretching into the southern plains and lower Mississippi Valley. So this is a very strong branch of the jet stream, and we look down here on our 500 millibar level, and as we saw earlier, we have a very potent shortwave trough here that is ejecting into the central United States. And we have very strong winds that are rounding the base of this trough here. And so that is going to be swinging out into the exit region of our trough. And then our shortwave is going to take on a very strong negative tilt. And I'll show you what that looks like when we look at some of the model data. And then we're going to go down here to our 850 millibar level. And as we would expect with such a strong upper level storm system, we have a strong low level mass response here that is occurring across the central United States. We have a pretty tight cyclone here at 850 millibars with some really strong low-level jet here out across the lower Mississippi Valley. We have about 40 to 50 knots or so, and even up to 60 knots here across Arkansas. And that is only going to strengthen even further as we go through the day on Friday. We'll show you what that looks like here in the model data when we look at that. And so with that low-level jet here, that is going to play two main roles for severe weather. It is one, going to bring up that warm air advection from the Gulf of Mexico and really help destabilize the atmosphere. And two, it is going to increase the low-level wind shear that is necessary for a tornado threat. So that is that change in wind direction as you go up with height and change in speed as well. So let's go down here to the surface here, and we have a surface low that is kind of broad but centered over eastern Oklahoma. And so this is our broad surface low. We have a pretty broad circulation across the southern plains and lower Mississippi Valley. And then we have our cold front that is stretching down across Texas. And we kind of have a couple of different warm fronts here. We have one warm front that is kind of over eastern Oklahoma and Arkansas, stretching into the Mid-South region. And then we have what looks like maybe a secondary warm front here that is across the northern Gulf. Here we'll take a closer up view of our surface data and see and can identify our surface features. So I would put the surface low somewhere in eastern Oklahoma, about right here. And then our cold front is going to stretch down here across southern Oklahoma and into central Texas, all the way down here. And then we have our warm front that is stretching across central Arkansas, kind of right up here through the Mid-South region. And then we have what looks like a secondary warm front, somewhat kind of over Houston, Texas, and Galveston, down into the central Gulf over here. And so south of this warm front here, this is where the best moisture and instability is going to reside. And this is going to be moving up to the north and the northeast. So we'll take a look at some sounding data here, and we'll analyze kind of the moisture quality across the lower Mississippi Valley. So this is the data that we got from the weather balloon launches at the National Weather Service offices conducted at around 6 p.m. Thursday. So let's take a look at some soundings across some of the areas of interest. Let's start at Little Rock, Arkansas. Here, so this is 6 p.m. This is just taking a look at the environment that some of these storms are in. So kind of a weak thermodynamic profile, or change in temperature as you go up with height is not all that steep up here. I can take a look at the parameter here. Yeah, mostly about 6 degrees Celsius per kilometer, so not all that steep. So weak thermodynamics, but very strong looking wind profile. We have strong veering of the winds with height here. So strong change in wind direction as you go up with altitude, and as well as the speed shear too. That is one thing here from this event that we have, is the really, really strong change in wind speed as you go up with height with such a dynamic storm system that is pushing through. So let's take a look down here to the south here. This is a little bit closer to the warm sector of our storm system, and this is a little bit stronger thermodynamics. This is over Shreveport, Louisiana, at 6 p.m. Thursday. So a little bit steeper lapse rates in the environment, so more instability here. So that is the distance between our parcel temperature and the environmental temperature. That is our CAPE. So CAPE value is about 800 joules per kilogram of instability. So that's marginal CAPE, but still sufficient for a severe weather threat, especially given such strong dynamics and the wind shear. Again, very strong looking wind profile, and look at this photograph here. Very strong curvature in that photograph here. That is graphing our the environmental winds as you go up with altitude here. So very strong and very elongated photograph as well. About 70 knots of deep layer shear here. And then we're going to go down here to the south here. So this is where we're going to look for our moisture quality. So we have a pretty decent moist layer here down in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Our moist layer extends up past 850 millibars. And the environment is kind of capped down here in southern Louisiana. We kind of have what we call a loaded gun sounding. So that is created by our elevated mixed layer here, our EML, that I've talked about it before. So that is just hot, dry air that originates from the desert southwest that is going to be transported towards our target region here. And so that's going to cap the atmosphere and prevent thunderstorm development until stronger ingredients arrive. So the rest of tonight, with the increase in instability and the amount of wind shear we have in the atmosphere, expecting an all hazards threat to materialize across parts of Arkansas and Louisiana. And so that means potential for damaging winds and large hail, and also the potential for a few tornadoes as well. That's just going to depend on if the instability that we get tonight, if that can be down enough, close enough to the surface, and so we can get a tornado threat to materialize. But we'll see if that's going to be the case. So now let's take a look at some of the model guidance and see what our expectations are going to be going forward. So now let's dive into some of the model data. So I'll start with the storm system for Friday, so for this week, and then we'll go into what the models are showing for next week, and we'll talk about next week for a little bit. So this is from the NAM. This is the latest 0Z run, and so we're looking at 9 p.m. on Thursday. So the NAM is initializing things here pretty well. We have our storm system here that is ejecting into the southern plains. This is a pretty low amplitude shortwave here that is getting its act together and going to be ejecting into the plains, into the lower Mississippi Valley by Friday morning. So going to around 6 a.m. Friday morning, so this is about sunrise, and the shortwave here is taking on a pretty strong negative tilt. So that is when the trough axis leans back to the left and is oriented from northwest to southeast. And so this these negatively tilted troughs here are generally more favored for severe weather, as we're going to have stronger temperature advection down to the low levels to destabilize the atmosphere, and we're also going to have stronger low-level wind shear too. So this shortwave here is going to be taking off pretty quickly here. So by around lunchtime on Friday, the shortwave, the trough axis is going to be located across the Mid-South and into the Tennessee Valley, and then again taking off to the northeast here across the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes region by Friday evening into Friday night. And some people have been comparing this system to some other events that have occurred in the past. I'm not going to really waste time on that, looking at the comparisons, but I'll just leave it at this. A very, very good thing that we do not, or that we're going to have some factors coming in together that are going to limit the overall severe weather threat for Friday. Otherwise, this could have ended up being a very dangerous severe weather situation for the southeastern states. But going forward here, let's take a look at our mass response here for this system. And it's a pretty robust mass response that is going to be occurring as a result from the storm system. Here is our low-level jet that is positioned at 9 p.m. Thursday. And so going forward here to around daybreak on Friday, that low-level jet shifts to the east and really begins to strengthen here across the lower Mississippi Valley and up into the Ohio Valley of about 60 to 70 knots flow out of the south here. And so that's a pretty strong low-level jet, and that's going to strengthen even further as we go through the day on Friday. This is why that tilt of our trough axis here is important, because that also strongly dictates the mass response that is occurring as a result from the storm system. With that negatively tilted shortwave, you get a much stronger belt of flow here in the low levels. Here, this is about 70 knots here in the purple shading, and in the blue shading here you see across North Alabama and into Tennessee, that's about 90 knots of flow out of the south. And so in miles per hour, that's about 100 miles per hour winds that is coming out of the south here, about 5,000 feet off the ground. So very, very strong flow here out of the south. And so that's why we're anticipating such a significant damaging wind threat, because it's not going to take much for those storms to take these winds here above the surface and mix them down to the ground. So that's why we're expecting a widespread damaging wind threat with potential for a few gusts up to around 70 or 75 miles per hour. But now let's look here at the surface. And so here is our surface low at around 6 a.m. Friday morning. Our surface low is centered over about Little Rock, Arkansas. Cold front is back here across Arkansas, Louisiana, and East Texas. And then what we've got ahead of the front is kind of a dry line-like feature here ahead of the cold front. And that is going to be progressing pretty quickly off to the east here as we go through the day on Friday. And so our surface low is centered up here in southern Illinois here by Friday afternoon. And then our cold front advances to the east here across the lower Mississippi Valley. And kind of our dry line-like feature is over the Mississippi-Alabama border. And so this is what is going to be our initiating boundary for storms that are going to be occurring across the lower Mississippi Valley on Friday morning. Kind of have our warm front here. Our warm front is actually going to be kind of occluding here on Friday as the storm system really begins to get wrapped up here. We have kind of this wedge feature, what we call a wedge. And so that is cool air that is coming off of the southern Appalachians here, and that is going to be bringing down cool and stable air down from the southern Appalachians down into kind of the Tennessee Valley and Ohio valleys. So that's going to help keep the tornado threat down here pretty low. And so that's the main thing I think that's kind of holding back the moisture return from this storm system. And so our warm front here is kind of including here across Alabama. Warm front is going to be situated somewhere across northern Alabama down into Georgia and the Carolinas. That's going to be slowly lifting up to the north here, but it's going to be held back by this wedge of cold air that is going to be stubborn to erode here across the southern U.S. So let's take a look at the moisture return here for this system. So these are the dew points here forecasted at 6 a.m. Friday morning. And then as we go into the afternoon hours, this is about lunchtime. This is right around noon on Friday. And so we have a pretty narrow corridor here of 60s dew points up here across Mississippi and Alabama and the Florida Gulf Coast. And so that wedge of cold air that we were looking at just a minute ago here is really preventing the northeastward extent of that moisture return. So we're not really going to get that low-level moisture and the instability here for a significant tornado threat all the way up here into, North Alabama and into Tennessee. So that is a very good thing for us. I still, however, cannot quite rule out maybe an embedded tornado threat as far north as probably about, I-20. We'll take a look at another model here and see, make some comparisons about on the moisture return, and we'll take a better look at the environment, what the forecasted environment here is going to be for this setup. So that's going to kind of slow down the moisture advection kind of during the day Friday. But then as we go into Friday afternoon across southern Georgia and into the Carolinas, we kind of see an increase of that moisture return. Those low 60s dew points here come up a little bit inland into the southeast U.S. coast. And so storms could tap into that environment and continue a damaging wind and an embedded tornado threat as we go through Friday evening. So I'm going to switch over to the HRRR run from this evening. So this is a different model that we're looking at, one of our higher resolution guidance. So first we're going to look at the moisture here and compare it to the NAM. So the NAM just had a pretty narrow stretch of low 60 dew points stretching up into Mississippi and Alabama. I think the HRRR is a little bit further north, with our low 60 dew points. So it's a little bit more robust with the moisture return. So we, at 6 a.m. Friday morning, we have low 60 dew points coming up into southeast Arkansas and then kind of slanting back down through Mississippi and down into the Alabama Gulf Coast. And those advanced eastward ahead of the line of storms that's going to be ongoing here across Tennessee and down into Mississippi. And so then as we go into the afternoon hours, those low 60 dew points come up to about the I-20 corridor up here in Alabama. And so that's going to be kind of separate where between the tornado threat and the damaging wind threat. And so where those low 60 dew points come up to, that's going to be the northern extent of what our tornado risk is going to be. So I think the tornado risk is mostly going to stay south, say Tennessee and the Tennessee Valley, down into central Alabama and down into southern Alabama, down into the Gulf Coast as well. And so as we go here through the afternoon hours, moisture return increases across the Georgia and South Carolina coast, and then comes up. We get stronger moisture return as we go into the afternoon hours on Friday for Georgia and the Carolinas, with our low 60 dew points coming up across the southern half of Georgia and South Carolina, coming up into North Carolina. So that could continue the severe weather threat if we have enough forcing here along the cold front. The high resolution guidance is really not all that supportive for a severe threat continuing into later into the afternoon. So we'll have to see how things play out for them. Otherwise, a damaging wind threat could continue with any storms that are ongoing here along the cold front. So let's go back here to Mississippi and Alabama, because that seems to be the most interesting part of the severe weather threat. So one thing that I want to point out here is one thing we need to watch out for is probably where the triple point could set up. So as I showed you earlier, the warm front is kind of going to set up here across Alabama and kind of slant down here like that. So our sort of pseudo dry line like feature would be across northern Alabama and down into southern Mississippi. And so this could create what we call a triple point. So that's where three air masses are going to come together. So we have our maritime tropical air mass down across central and southern Alabama. And we kind of have our maritime polar air mass north of that warm front. And then we kind of have behind that pseudo dry line our more continental polar air mass. Temperatures fall back into the 50s behind this feature. So our cold front is always still back out here across the Mississippi River. But we could still have somewhat of an intersection between three different air masses. And so that's where the triple point can set up. And so that's where we could have local enhancement of low-level wind shear and the convergence down in the low levels. And so that can locally enhance the tornado threat. So we do need to watch out where that triple point sets up, as that could be where we could see the tornado threat materialize. Right now, I would be more concerned about that over central Alabama, and so I think, again, the tornado threat over Tennessee and northern Alabama is very, very low. And I think the damaging wind threat is going to be the main concern as we go through the day on Friday. So let's take a look here at some of the reflectivity. So this is just a possible outcome from our high resolution guidance. And so radar may or may not look exactly like this as we go through the day on Friday. So let's go here to about 9 a.m. So we have our line of storms that is ongoing across western Tennessee and down into Mississippi. And then we have a lot of cells that are developing out ahead of this line of storms, but most of these are going to be elevated here across Alabama as they're going to be elevated above that stable layer, and I will show you what that kind of looks like here. This is a forecast sounding from the HRRR, and so there's on this run, it may be a little bit more shallow than what some other runs have shown, but we kind of have this temperature inversion right down here at the surface, where surface temperatures are 59, are kind of in the upper 50s, right around 60 degrees. If we can get our temperatures up into, say, the low to mid 60s, that might be enough to erode that temperature inversion, and then the instability then becomes surface-based, and so your storms can also then become surface-based. So that's can be concerning for a potential tornado threat. So that's just those are just some things that we need to watch for, is what our surface temperatures and the dew points look like, and where that triple point may set up, because all of that could dictate where the tornado threat may materialize. But overall, in this sounding here, we have mostly elevated instability, very strong wind profile here, very strong speed shear with deep layer shear coming up to around 90 knots. So that is really, really strong. It may actually be a little bit too strong and could rip apart those thunderstorm updrafts that are coming up into the atmosphere. So overall, mostly just a damaging wind threat. A straight line wind threat is going to be the main concern, with some gusts coming up to about 50 to 60 miles per hour, and could even see a few gusts higher than that, maybe up towards about 70 miles per hour, kind of over northern Mississippi and northern Alabama. And so around lunchtime, storms are probably crossing over I-65 over into the eastern half of Alabama, and then moving into Georgia by around 2 o'clock or so. And so don't get caught up here in what exactly the reflectivity looks like. There's probably going to be the radar might look a little bit more intense than this, or it may not. So we'll just have to see what radar might look like during the day on Friday. So that's going to be the main idea for Friday. Now let's talk about our next storm system that we're going to be watching here across the southern United States. So we're switching back here to the GFS model, and we're going to go forward here to next week. So this right here is our storm system over Friday. That's going to be ejecting out into the northeastern United States. And then on Sunday, we're kind of left with this zonal flow that is west to east here across much of the country. And we're going to be watching this shortwave here coming up, and it's going to be rotating through this long wave trough over the United States. We have an embedded shortwave here. I'll highlight that over here. That is going to be ejecting into the southern plains as we go through the day on Monday. And so that is going to be our next storm system that we're watching for next week. And as some of you may have already heard by now, we might be talking the potential for winter weather, as we're going to have a very, very strong cold front here that is coming through on Sunday into Monday. And so that is going to be bringing down pretty strong Arctic air mass down from Canada and the northern United States, and bring that down all the way to the southern U.S. And so if precipitation lines up pretty well with that, we could end up with an interesting winter weather event across the southern United States on Monday into Tuesday. So I'm not going to really talk about much accumulations at this point, because the uncertainty is too high, and just a lot of factors that can make a difference on the accumulation. So I'm not really going to get specifics onto that. I'll do another video here as this setup gets a little bit closer, and we'll look at some more specifics on things like accumulations and timing and things like that. But we're just going to look at what the main players are going to be. So we have this shortwave here that's rotating here through the southern plains and into the lower Mississippi Valley on Monday. And then if we go down here to the surface, let me show you what surface temperatures are going to be doing over the weekend. So this is Saturday here and around noon. So our cold front that's coming through on Friday is all the way out here into the Atlantic Ocean and down into the Gulf of Mexico. And then we're going to get a secondary shot of cold air as we go through the day on Sunday Here you see this big Arctic front that is over the eastern seaboard and stretching down here into the southern United States. And freezing line here is this white dashed line you see just behind that. So that is where temperatures are going to fall below freezing behind that. So if we go through the day on Sunday and go through the evening hours, that cold air really begins to surge southward towards the Gulf Coast. And so that's where we could be setting up for a winter weather threat. And that is kind of the cold snap that we've kind of been looking for if we're going to see a serious winter weather threat for the southern U.S. And so the next thing that we're watching for is going to be a low pressure system that develops in the Gulf. And where that develops and the exact track of that low pressure system is really going to heavily dictate what the exact outcome is across the southern United States and places like the lower Mississippi and the Tennessee valleys. That's really going to have a strong impact on what exactly happens. So this model run here takes the low pressure system across the central Gulf here and then moves it up across the southeast U.S. coast. So we really need the low pressure system to be over the northern Gulf, right up across the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, for a more significant winter storm threat. But with the low pressure developing over the northern Gulf, you get a little bit better moisture and a little bit better lift and forcing to get precipitation. So with our temperatures likely being below freezing during this time, that much we know. But what we really need to figure out is a track of that low pressure system. So we're going to take a look. So I'm going to compare this with the European run and see how this looks and see if there are any similarities with the GFS. So this is the European model. This is the 12Z run from Thursday. This is as of Sunday morning here. So our cold front is again located kind of back out here across the northeastern United States, stretching down into the Gulf of Mexico. That's bringing down this Arctic air mass, and behind it here, so at least that part is similar. And then by Monday, this is Monday afternoon, we see that low pressure system beginning to form across the Gulf of Mexico. You see that kind of swirl here in the wind barbs here. So that's where the low pressure system develops. And then again, it develops over the western Gulf and kind of tracks across the central Gulf of Mexico. So right now, confidence in any significant winter storm right now is kind of on the lower side right now. I'd like to see that low pressure system further north, kind of right over the Gulf Coast, for a more significant winter storm threat. But at least with this solution, we could probably squeeze out some snow flurries or some light snow showers across the southern United States here, including the lower Mississippi Valley and the Tennessee valleys, and places like that that are circled here for Monday. But I'll do another video here as this event gets a little bit closer and can say with a little bit more confidence on whether or not we're going to see snow and how much snow or how much frozen precipitation we might get. So that's going to cover it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.